It's really very unpleasant footage, very distressing imagery. The image of her having a man's hands around her neck, of course, caused something of an outcry. Claims that this was a racist attack by an Asian shopkeeper on a black shopper. Protests outside the store forced the store to close. We understand the shopkeeper has now gone into hiding. She's been questioned on a suspicion of assault. He has also been questioned. Let's talk about the whole thing with Dr. Rakib Ehsan. He's a social commentator and he's written about this. Good morning to you, Rakib.
Good morning, Julia. How are you?
Very well, thank you for joining us. Just to try to summarise that story there, it really is quite an extraordinary scene, that video. It's really quite troubling watching that video. But what I found extraordinary was how quickly this became a race row.
No, absolutely. And I think it shows how a variety of events which take place in our society are increasingly interpreted through the prism of race. But I'd make this point, Julia, that tensions between elements of Britain's black population and wider Asian population is nothing new. We've had riots in the past in Birmingham, for example, where there are very similar dynamics, animosity and tensions between shopkeepers of Asian heritage and black British customers. And they played a heavy hand in the simmering tensions, you could say, which led up to the 2005 riots in the areas of Handsworth and Lozells in Birmingham. So what we're seeing, and it's something that we've talked about in the past, that when you look at the sharpest social tensions in modern Britain, quite often it's between its non-white minorities, and often it doesn't involve members of the white British mainstream at all.
Yeah, that's the interesting thing. And again, even when you talk about the anti-Semitic attack, these horrific rise in anti-Semitic attacks, well, it's not by British whites. The attacks have actually largely been by I understand a large percentage are actually by Muslims, Muslim extremists. I mean, this is the thing. You're into the nuances of this, but we only pay attention when it's seen to be far right white, for instance. Now, look, none of this is acceptable. None of this is something that we want in this country. It just seemed to me this was an altercation in a store between a woman who was perceived, we don't know whether she was shoplifting or not, but claimed by the shopkeeper to have been shoplifting, been taking goods without paying them, and him stopping her. Now, for me, the issue was, what rights does a shopkeeper have in that scenario to prevent someone from leaving his store with, he believes, goods that she has not paid for? She obviously feels that she had the right to walk out of that store, whether or not items had been paid for or not. The question is, like, where are the police in this scenario? Because we know that shopkeepers are just tearing their hair out, that anyone could just come in, take what they want and walk straight out. Now, whether or not she was actually doing that or not, that's something that the courts will, or the police will no doubt decide. We are not in a position to make that judgment, but we just heard claims and counterclaims. But the idea that because she was black, because he was Asian, that this was an issue, and the idea that there's an issue of race on Rye Lane in Peckham, where the vast majority of customers will be black in that area, and a lot of the shops are owned by British Asians. I just find it extraordinary that this has been able to erupt as a race issue, and you're saying this is a result of underlying racial tensions that are there all the time. Oh, we seem to have lost your line. No, we got you. Right, we got you.
Yeah, so I think we can't ignore the racial dynamics there. There are tensions there. But as you say, I think that the bigger issue here, Julia, for me, is that there's almost been this de facto decriminalisation of low-level crime in many urban areas. And shoplifting is definitely involved in that. And I think that the point that I'd make, that firstly, we have to talk about how to successfully integrate racially diverse communities, but also in particular areas, there needs to be stronger law and order. I think that model of local neighbourhood policing, especially in areas of the high concentration of street shops, that needs to be part of the discussion. Because I think that all too often that sort of lower level crime, many people are getting away with it, and that's not helping shopkeepers in the slightest.
No, indeed. What is the solution?
Well, the solutions will be very difficult. I think that firstly, we have to understand that there are racial tensions within communities, especially in southeast London. And there's also been a wearing down of relations between customers and shopkeepers. And I think you made a very good point there, that many of the businesses that actually cater for specific needs of black British customers are Asian owned. So you think that those are opportunities for contact to build trust and respect across racial groups, but that doesn't seem to be happening. So how do we address those tensions? How do we improve those relationships? But crucially for me, Julia, and this is a very important point that you made, local neighbourhood policing in many urban areas has been gutted.
Yeah.
And what we need to see here is greater national and local leadership to ensure that those communities are more cohesive and that law and order is a genuine presence in our society.
Yeah, well, maybe if a shopkeeper had just misgendered her, the police might have turned up in time and saved everyone all the hassle. Dr. Rakib Ehsan, thank you very much indeed for joining us. Sam Armstrong is still with me. I mean, this again, it's become a race issue, and yet again another story becomes a race issue. Which for me, this is a crime and policing issue, quite clearly. But again, we're constantly told how wonderfully diverse and wonderful London is, and isn't it fabulous? And how if I walked along the Thames with my white husband and my white daughter, according to Sadiq Khan's staff, we wouldn't be a true representative of a realistic representation of London, because I'm obviously my family is imaginary. The fact that the majority of families in London are actually white, and yet we're told it's all diversity and it's wonderful. Well, it doesn't seem to be working out that way in Peckham.
Yeah, it's the story that puts the lie to Britain's multicultural claim. It is not so, harmonious all the time, especially, and we've seen it between different groups, even within the Asian community, Hindus versus Muslims.
And we've seen that on the streets, haven't we, in Leicester and elsewhere.